Today's daf is Masechta Menachos Daf Mem Vav 46. Beautiful daf today, and let's just review what we discussed yesterday. Yesterday we discussed Shavuos is a very big day in the Beis Hamikdash, which you would bring 2 cows for the Musaf of Chag HaShavuos, 2 cows, 1 ram. Ram is a sheep that's 13 months old, and 7 sheeps that's within the year as carbon oilers, and then a goat for a chatas. That was the musaf. And we learned yesterday, let's say there was a shortage of sheep and they could only bring 6 sheep or 5 sheep. So then we said yesterday that it's okay. Okay. Or if let's say they only found 1 cow out of 2, it's also okay. But then we learned yesterday that there is something called shtei halechem. On Shavuos, there was additional oilus. They brought a mincha called shtei halechem. You see, it's 2 breads. See over here, it's 2 breads, and these 2 breads, they brought it along with 2 sheeps for a shlomim, which means as part of their services, they took the breads, put it on the live sheep, and they made a tenufa. They lifted it up. And then they brought the sheep as a shlomim. And then the kohanim ate the breads. Hi, Sheldon, we just began.
Okay, thank you.
So we're just talking about the karbanos of the 2 shtei halechem, the 2 breads on Shavuos. In addition to bringing a regular musaf, they brought a carbon mincha of 2 chametz breads. It looks like this, but they're chametz. And they brought them together with 2 sheeps of shlamim. They lifted them together. And then the kahanim would, shech the shlamim sheeps. And then they would eat the shlamim meat along with the breads for that day and that night. The purpose of these 2 breads was to allow chodosh in the Beis Hamikdash. Chodosh was mutter already on Pesach time outside the Beis Hamikdash, but to bring flour offerings from the new crop, you had to wait till Shavuos time until they did this service called shtei halechem. Now, along with the shtei halechem and the 2 sheeps, the Torah also says you bring 1 cow for a par echad, 2 rams, 7 sheeps for a carbon oila, a little different than the musaf, and you have to have these exact numbers: 2 rams, 7 sheeps, 1 cow, and then a goat for a chatas. Now, what we're going to learn right now is we discussed yesterday. Let's just mention one thing that yesterday we discussed. Let's say they couldn't find sheeps for a shlamim. Which is more important? So then did they bring the breads without the sheep? So Rabbi Akiva says, yes, breads are the absolute most important thing. Shimon ben Anna said, no, the opposite. Only the sheep is important. If they just have the breads, they don't do anything with the breads. If they have the sheep without the breads, then they'll just be marker of the sheep, because the main thing is the sheep. Now comes along the Gemara. Okay, we're starting from Daf Mem Hey Amud Beis, about 1 line from the bottom, the last line. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, Hakol Moedim, everybody would agree. We go to Mem Vav Amud Aleph. We go to Mem Vav Amud Aleph, the top line. Shem Huskuku Zelazeh, Shema Akvin Zezeh. That means once they became bounded, the sheep with the shtei halechem, so then if one of them goes missing, then the whole carbon is possible. What does that mean? During the time that they slaughtered, Rabbi Yochanan is going to say that if they slaughtered the sheep, okay, imagine they slaughtered the sheep. We'll make a red line. They slaughtered the sheep. And then a bear came, like a wild animal came into Beis Hamikdash and ate up the breads. So that invalidates the sheep. In other words, the whole thing you have to start over again because they're now bounded together. What happens to one influences the other. If the bear came and ate up the sheep, then the breads are invalid. You have to start all over again. Once they became bounded by the shechita. That's what he says. If they became bounded with each other, that means they can stop each other, and you have to destroy the remainder. In other words, if the bear came into the base of Mikdash and ate up the breads, then you have to take the animals, the two sheep, and throw it into the garbage. Or Rashi says you throw it into the base of Sreifra. You burn it. Now, the Ezuhu Zika Shlahen, what causes the breads with the shlamim to be bounded with each other? Shchita. Only after the slaughtering of the shlamim, only after the slaughtering of the sheep, as you see a red line, then they're bounded. Whatever happens to one influences the other. But remember, there's a step before the slaughtering of the shlamim. There's a step called tenufa, where we take the breads, put it on the live animals, and the kohanim lift it up like a lulav, right? Does that bind them to each other? That's the Gemara's next question. What about tenufa? Just the lifting of the breads with the animal. Does it bind the two, or does it not bind the two? Does it bind it together? And Shaitli with Rabbi Yochanan. So why don't you answer? You could figure it out from the words of Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said Shchita Zika. Only the slaughtering makes them bounded together. Miklal the Tnufa Eina Zika. So you see from here, just by lifting it together, just by lifting the animal together. Here's the Shtei Halechem. Here's the sheep, the Shalmi Tzivar. And if you lift them together, which you're supposed to do, you put the breads onto the live sheep and you lift them up like a lulav and esrog. And then what happened was the bear came and ate up the breads. The bear came and ate up the breads, maybe will not have an influence on the sheep. And therefore the sheep are still kosher and you can still use these sheep. So that's the question of the Gemara. So Rabbi Yochanan said only shchita oisazika utnufa. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan meant that shchita only shchita binds them together, but not the lifting. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan meant shchita pshitale. Rabbi Yochanan was certain that if you shech them, then they're bounded to each other. Utnufa masapkale. But just by lifting them together, Rabbi Yochanan wasn't 100% sure if they're bounded. Teku, the Gemara leaves that by a question. So bottom line is, back to the picture. If you have the Shtei Lechem with the two sheeps of the Shlamim, okay, now they become at one point bounded with each other. For sure, if you slaughter the sheep, they're bounded with each other, which means that, let's say a bear came and ate up the sheep, then the Shtei Lechem becomes puzzled. You have to burn the Shtei Lechem and redo the whole service again. And the vice versa. If the Shtei Lechem became eaten by the bear, then you have to redo it again. However, the question was, let's say they didn't slaughter the sheep; they just lifted it together with the Shtei Lechem. They put it together and lifted it up. Does that bind them or not? So the Gemara remains unresolved. Now, Amar le Rabbi Yehuda bar Chidil Rav Huna bar Yeshua. Rabbi Yehuda asked the question. Let's take a look at the pasuk. If we look at the pasuk closely, Kodesh Yil Hashem Lakayim Basar Tnufik Siv Upliga Ben Nanas Rabbi Kiva. If we look at the psukim say at the bottom of course, I'm taking this all from the psukim in Parshas Emor, which tells you about the Shtei Lechem. Then the Torah says, "V'heinif oisam al lechem akurim." You lift them together with the breads. What together? Which together? So the pasuk says, "Al shnei kvasim." Those two shlamim sheeps are lifted together with the breads, and then the Torah tells you, "Kodesh Yol Hashem Koyin." That makes it the meat become holy and for the kohen, and the kohen eats it like a regular shlamim, along with the breads. Now, Benanas and Reb Shimon had a machlokes. What's more important, the breads or the sheep? So we see that even after the tnufa, based on this pasuk, since the Torah says only one of them is absolute, one of them is more important than the other, the bread or the sheep. So we see that they're not bounded together by the tenufa. That's the question that the Gemara just asked. So how could you have a suffix by tenufa when the pasuk clearly says that after tenufa they're not bounded with each other because there was a machlekes between Benanas and Rabbi Akiva. So, according to your reason, basa tenufa loy basa shchita, will you not agree that after shchita they're bounded with each other? Everybody agrees after shchita that was bounded with each other, and yet the Torah tells you that after the shchita, the meat belongs to the kohen. And what do you mean to tell me they're not bounded with each other? So what must be? The pasuk is talking about prior to you doing anything. That's what the thing that is going to be to the kohen, for example, the meat or the bread, that's the main important ingredient. But before they're bounded up, that we could say the saying even from prior to tenufa. That's what we're discussing over here. The Torah is not exactly the order of tenufa and then telling you which is important. The Torah is just telling you what you do with the breads and the meat, and with the breads and the sheep. But then the Torah tells you, but I'm telling you, one of them is more important than the other. So let's go back and let's just get it clear. We have these two breads and the two sheeps. Before you do anything, let's say you can't afford sheep. Let's say there's a disease, there's no sheep. Do you bring the breads alone as a standalone? Rabbi Kiva says yes. Shimon ben Anna says no. Okay. Ben Anna says the most important is the sheep. So if you get the sheep without the breads, yes. According to Rabbi Kiva, you don't bring the sheep without the breads because the bread is more important. According to Ben Anna's, the sheep is more important. Fine. But once you're bringing everything and they become bounded, they certainly become bounded if you shech the sheep. So then the shtei lechem is bounded with the sheep, and whatever happens to the sheep passes the breads, and whatever happens to the breads passes the sheep. But the question was, by the tenufa and the Gemara remains that unresolved. Says the Gemara, Ushchita oisazika. Does shchita create a bond with the breads? Now, what other carbon needs to be brought with breads? Think about it. We had this discussion before. There's another carbon that needs to be brought with breads, and we're going to see that it does not need, it's not bounded.
Doesn't the Toda have bread also?
That's correct. So here's the carbon Toda. Let's say somebody is sick, right? Yeah. Very good. Somebody's sick and he just got released from the hospital. So he brings a carbon Toda, a zevach Toda, a sheep, let's say, with a bunch of breads. Okay, here's the breads. You bring 40 breads. You bring 40 breads. Hold on. You bring 40 breads, and then you lift the breads, and you give 4 of the breads to the kohen, one of every type, and one of every type, and then the remainder 36 breads, as you can see, are eaten. You eat it. You have a suda with your friends. Okay, I'm going to just say you have a suda with your friends. See, he's having a suda with his friends with the rest of the meat and the 36 breads, and then 4 breads get to the kohen. Fine. Now we're going to see in this brisa that whatever is going to happen to the breads is not going to affect the carbon. That's the problem. Uraminu, I'm going to ask you a contradiction. Before you shechted the animal, right? What happens if one of the breads have to be whole? Let's say you have the breads, but one of the breads on the carbon tamid broke. You see, they're supposed to be whole. Let's say this rakikin split in half. So then we know it's pasul. For whatever reason, it's pasul. So before you did the shchita, they're not bounded with each other. Yavi lechem acha v'shoichet. You bring another bread, and then you do the carbon taida. Mishashachta nifras lachma. But when you shechted, the bread got broken. When you shechted, the bread got broken. So now the bread's a pasul, right? So what do? So hadam yizarek, you spray the blood, you go on with the service. You see the animal is still kosher. V'dei nidre liyotza v'alechem pasul. The lechem is pasul, and you weren't yotzi yineder. You have to bring a new carbon taida. Nevertheless, the animal is still kosher. You don't say the lechem is pasul, now the animal's pasul. So this is a question. The brisa continues. Nizr kadam. Let's say you sprinkled the blood. Oh, so now you finished the carbon. Then it broke. Then one of the matzahs broke. Then Torah min hashal mal paras. You give the kohen whole matzahs. You don't give him the broken one. You give him from the whole one. Now, here's another example of something. Achloi shachta, the brisa continues, yotza lachma. Let's say one of the breads left Yerushalayim before you shechted the animal. So machnisa, you bring it back, v'shoichet, because it's not a holy bread. Mishashachta, but let's say you shechted before you sprinkled the blood. Yotza lachma, one of the breads left Yerushalayim. Oh, so now it's puzzle bread. Hadam yizarek, the carbon is still good. You spilled the blood, v'abasi ya'echel, v'dei nidrei liyotza v'alechem puzzle. You weren't yotzi neder, and the lechem is puzzle. Nizrak hadam, once you sprinkled the blood, so now it was kosher, everything is kosher, and then one of the breads left. So you give the kohen what's from the breads that are still in Yerushalayim, you give him the breads, and you make up for those breads that left Yerushalayim. Let's say until you shechted it, nitmo lachma, the breads became tamei. Maybe lechem acha v'shechet, and you bring another bread and shecht. If the bread became tamei, bring another bread. Mishashachta, but let's say you did the shechita. Nitma lachma. Now the breads became tamei. Hadam yizarek v'abasa yoichel v'idei nidra yotzish atzitzim ratzal tamei. Here we'll say that the guy was yotze his neder. He doesn't have to bring a new carbon taida, even though the lechem is possible because the tzitz lets things like dealing with tumah slide. But the bottom line is, we always see in this brisa that despite you're going to shech the animal and something happens with the bread, it doesn't affect the animal. If you're going to tell me that a shechita makes a bond between the animal, the carbon, and the breads, given the since they're bounded, the shechita, once you slaughter the animal, if lachem, once the breads become pasul, then the animal should become pasul. So why does the brisa continue to say that despite the breads being pasul, continue with the animal and make the carbon kosher? And says the Gemara, the toida is very different than the shtei alechem. Shana toida is different. The Rachmanya kari shlamim. The Torah calls it a shlamim. Ma shlamim krevim b'loy lechem. Av toida krevim b'loy lechem. That the Torah calls it a shlamim. For whatever reason, a toida has a name shlamim to it. And normal shlamim, you don't bring breads to it. So therefore, the toida alone, without the breads, will still be kosher. On the other hand, when we're dealing with the shtei halechem, it's not called the Torah doesn't call it the Torah calls it that the shtei halechem are connected with the shlamim. Here, the Torah specifically connects the breads with the shlamim, so that's why they're bounded with each other. And if one becomes pasul, the other is pasul. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, if you want to say that lifting it does make a bond, let's say just by lifting the breads with the animal, the live animal with the breads, they're bonded with each other. And what happens to one happens to the other. So, let's say a bear came and destroyed the breads, right? So then, of the kvasim, you got to get rid of the sheeps. I guess what you do with the sheeps is you got to get new sheeps. Okay. Of the kvasim, but if you lose the sheeps, let's say a bear ate up the sheeps of the lechem, then the breads are lost. If you want to say that tenufa does not make a zika, if you want to say that tenufa doesn't bond them together, so then simple. If you bring the breads and the sheep and they lift them together, they're not bonded. You lost the breads, the heavy lechem afar, and you bring another bread. Okay, so you substituted. So you can still use the sheep because they're not really bounded. You're just replacing the breads, which were totally lost. Now the question is, but you did a sheep, you did the tnufa with the previous breads. So now that you bring new breads, I say halechem ton tnufa, ain't ton tnufa. The new breads, do they need to be lifted or not? Now, of the kavasim, if the sheeps were lost and you're replacing the sheeps, like you have to make a new tnufa. The vade bay tnufa. You have to do tnufa because it's the sheep that is going to matter the bread. You see, once they shech the sheep, then you can eat the breads. But what happens the opposite case? The sheep is still there. You're just replacing the breads. Do you have to make a new lifting? Kita bayalach, avad halechem. You lost the bread. According to Ben Nanas, that says the main thing is the sheep. The sheep is the most important part of the service, not the breads. Certainly, you don't have to bake a new tenufa because the sheep is the most important. My question is, I'll leave it to Rabbi Kiva. He holds Rabbi Kiva holds lechem is the most important, and therefore you never bring sheep standalone. But you could bring bread standalone. So therefore, breads are most important. But Kiva the lechem ikar. Since the main thing is the breads, and you're replacing the breads because what happened was you did tenufa, right? And then after you finished the trufas, a bear came and ate the bread. So now you're replacing the breads, and the main thing of the service is the bread. You'll have to do a new tenufa. Dilma, or maybe Rabbi Kiva would hold, Kiva the matir in the day, kvasim ninhu, since what's going to make the breads permitted is the sheep. So the sheep, the fact that you already lifted the sheep will not require you to lift it again. So light sarach tenufa, you don't have to lift it again. Take you, the Gemara leaves that unresolved. Again, you would ask yourself a question: what do you mean? What's the big deal? Lift the animal again if you're Suffolk. Well, it's not so simple. Are you allowed to play around with kachim and lift it up if you don't have to? So this the Gemara leaves unresolved. Now the Gemara just asks a simple question. Let's go back to the karbanos of the shtei alechem. Notice I'm saying over here that it's only the sheep, the shalomim, affect the breads. What about, that there's a parechad, 2 rams, 7 sheep, they're brought as carbon oilers. Do they affect the breads? If a psul happens with them, it doesn't affect the breads. They're not connected with each other. The Gemara's question is, why not? That's the Gemara's question. Amalei, Abai l'Rava. Abai said to Rava, why is the shnei kvasim, the 2 shlamim, the mekachve lechem uma'akve, they make the breads holy. After you slaughter the shlamim, then the breads are holy. And uma'akve, and whatever is going to happen to the breads affects the carbon. Umayshna shiva kvasim par elim, all the other oilers, lechem, they don't make the breads holy. Why didn't the Torah connect them? Why are they not connected with the 2 breads? If they're part of their service, why are they not connected with the breads? It's a good question. So the Gemara is going to say, what makes the sheep, the shlamim, more connected to the breads than the oiler is because you're lifting them together. The Torah requires you to lift the 2 sheeps together with the breads. That's what the Gemara is going to say. Amalei, so Rava answered, since they're connected by the tnufa, so therefore they're connected. That's what connects the breads with the animal, and only the shlamim animal, because you're lifting only the shlamim animal. Says the Gemara, but a carbon taida which has 40 breads, right? They're not. You don't lift the breads together with the all 40 breads together with the animal. And yet, once you shech the animal, it becomes kaddish. Uma'akva. And ma'akva means that if you have 40 breads without a carbon, you don't bring the 40 breads. So the main thing is they're connected, and yet you're not lifting them together. So why is a toida different? So the Gemara says, the truth is, you're right. But al-ketoida, Ma toida shlomim, af hochanami shlomim. So maybe what connects the breads with the animals is only because by the toida, the animals are shlomim. And by the shtei alechem, what carbon are we connected with the breads? The shlomim. So the key is it's not the lifting together. It's the fact that it's a shlomim. That's what connects it with the breads. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Me dummy, how could you compare a taida to a shtei alechem? Hasam like a zivicha achrina bahadei. By a regular taida, it's just one animal connected to a bread. So therefore, of course, there's a connection. Over here, maybe since there are more animals, since some of them are oilers, maybe they should be connected to the bread as well. That's the question. Maybe they should be connected to the bread as well. They both should be kaddish. Ella says the Gemara ke'el nazir. It's like the ram of a nazir. When a nazir fulfills his obligation, at the end of his obligation, he brings a male sheep for an oila, he brings a female sheep for a chatas, and an ayil for a shlomim. So he's bringing a bunch of karbonis. He's chatas and oila, but the shlomim is the main thing because he's also bringing two sets of breads. So there we see over there, afagav the ikis vocham achrina. Even though there's other karbonis, shlomim hu de mekache. It's the shlomim that makes the breads holy, not the oila or the chatas that the nazir brings. Midi achrin and loy. Achinami also over here loishna. It's only the oila. It's only the shlomim that's going to mekadesh the breads, but not the other karbonis. That's what we see from the el nazir. The hasam in nolan. And how do you know by a and Hasam in Nolan, here we'll stop. Hasam in Nolan, how do we know over there? How do we know by a Nazir that it's only the Shlomim that makes the breads holy? The Tanya we learned to the Braisa, where so Ayel Yasa Zevach Shlomim Hashem Al Sal Hamatzis. Melamed through a basket of matzahs. Melamed Shasal B'Choiva La'ayel. The reason why you're bringing these breads, these matzahs breads, is by the Nazir is because you're bringing a ram for a shlomim. Ushchitis ayal mekatchen, and shechting the ram makes the matzah holy. Lefichach, therefore, shachtish leilishmoi. If you shecht the ram for another carbon, like kitchalech, and the breads are not holy. So we see clearly by what sanctifies the matzahs by a Nazir, it's the shlomim versus the other carbonis that he brings. So same thing by the shtei alechem, it's the kavasim, the shechting of the sheep, that makes the shtei alechem holy, and not the oila and the par and the shivas kavasim. They're not related so much to the lechem, although at the time that you're doing the shtei alechem, you have to bring all these other carbonis as well. Okay, we'll take a break here. So let us continue. So the Gemara continues and says, Tarabonim. Let's say you bring the shtei alechem, the two breads, because they couldn't find sheep, so they brought the two breads. So they're going to wave the breads, but since you didn't have sheep, so therefore the kahana are not supposed to eat the breads. So yunfu, you just wave it, and let them rot a little bit the breads, and then probably in a day or two you burn it. So the Gemara asks a question on this brisa. Manashach, if you're allowed to eat the breads, let us eat it. Because if you hold that the breads are most important and you're bringing the breads, eat the breads. If you're supposed to burn it because you didn't have the shlamims, then you should burn the breads right away. Why do you have to wait till it rots? And says the Gemara, really, the breads are supposed to be eaten. But maybe they're going to have new sheep next year. Let's say next year there won't be a problem with finding sheep. The Kahana are going to say, last year we didn't eat the breads without the sheep, right? Because we didn't have breads. Akshav nami nechel, they're not going to wait till the sheep is shechted. They're going to eat the breads right away. The inu layada, but the kahanim are not going to be aware. They're started last year lo have a kvasim. The reason why you ate the breads is because you didn't have the sheep in hushari and nafshay, so the breads were automatically permitted to eat. Hashadika kvasim. Now that you have sheep, kvasim hu deshari lahu, and therefore the sheep are the ones that are matter. So Rabbi said it's just a gzeira. Really, you can eat it. The fact is that maybe next year the kahanim are going to eat the breads without waiting for the shechting of the sheep. So therefore, even this year, they said, really, you're not supposed to burn it. So we wait till it rots, and then you can burn it. And then Rabbah brings a source, and then Gemara slugs off that source. Rav Yosef, we're going to skip down to what Rav Yosef says. Rav Yosef says, Rav Yosef says, really, if you just have the breads without the sheep, then you're supposed to burn the breads. So then why don't you burn it right away? The reason why you don't burn it right away, if you don't burn kachim on yontiv. Amalei Abaya says, me dummy. Well, of course. Hasam lav mitzvah mekach. There, you don't burn kachim on yontiv that are noisar because you can wait till the next day to do it. Hacha, over here, the mitzvah mekach is a mitzvah to burn a kachim on yontiv if that was the mitzvah to do. Lisavini. Me de have a pavasam shem kippurim. On par and the cow and the goat on Yom Kippur are burnt on Yom Kippur. You make a fire and you burn it. Because that was the mitzvah to do with the parvasoyer. And so also over here, since you're not allowed to eat the lechem, they stay a lechem, because you don't have sheep to matter it. So therefore, you should burn it even on Yontiv. You shouldn't have to wait till after Yontiv to burn it. So what did Rabbi Yosef mean? Rav Yosef says, Gzeira Shem Yishdavnu Lehem Kvasol Machmikan. Maybe they'll find sheep. And therefore, we wait as long as we can and not burn it. Abai says, okay, but why do you have to wait till tomorrow? Let's wait till sundown. And when they don't find any more sheep, then burn it. Why do you have to wait till my Uber Tzurasa? What does the Brisa mean that you have to wait till it rots and loses its form? And says the Gemara, that didn't mean lose its form. Rotting, it means suras hakrovasam. It means the time when you could be makrav it. During that time, if that time passed, then you can burn it. But really, you don't have to wait till the next day to burn it. As soon as, let's say, sundown comes and you didn't find new sheep to mata the lechem, you could burn it right then, even before tzeisa kachavim. Rava says, if you just bring the shtei alechem without the sheep, lachilanasa, you could eat the breads. And because of the gzeir of Rabbah, we said that the kahanim should not eat it. What was Rabbah's gzeira? Is that next year the kahanim are going to eat the breads without waiting for the sheep. So therefore, this year they said that the bread should not be eaten without the sheep. But lav mitamei el mikra, I have a pasuk that backs me up. And the pasuk, Rabbah had a point to prove that's lachila asin. He brought a braya from a Mishnah. But Rabbah says even the pasuk seems to say that you're allowed to eat the breads even if it's a standalone. Mina minallah. The Ksiv pasuk says, "To aviu lechem tenuah, bring the breads, bikurim lashem." These lechem have a din like bikurim. Ma bikurim b'fnei, just like the fruits, the first fruit that you give to the kohen, you bring it without a carbon. Af shtei lechem. So also the shtei lechem b'fnei atzman can be brought by itself without sheeps. Umina, and it's mamish exactly like bikurim. Ma bikurim lachila, just like bikurim can be eaten without a carbon. There's no carbon when you give the first fruits to the kohen. So also the shtei lechem could be eaten even if it's standalone and you didn't bring the sheep. So then why don't you eat them? Because of a gzeira of Rabbah, and that's why we don't eat them. Okay, we will stop over here on Daf Mem Zayin.